Yep, it's arena shooter time again. Means I'm once again going to have to explain why I don't consider Team Fortress 2 an MMO. Progression is an important part of what makes a game for me. There needs to be some form of progression, something to earn as you play. And I can't believe I keep having to say this, but hats don't count. My idea of an arena shooter qualifying is something where you don't have access to most of the content to start, instead having to play the game repeatedly and earn more of those goodies and levels as you advance. TF2 isn't one of those. So now it's time to review a title that looks a lot like it. Why do I do this to myself? This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Loadout. Developed and published via Steam by Edge of Reality, Loadout is an arena shooter with a ton of quirks, but the most notable being the ability to combine a multitude of weapon parts and ammunition to create a customizable and unique weapon that fits your playstyle, and to take to the battle. As you play, you'll unlock more and more options for your weapons, allowing players to create their own personal arsenal, most of which will probably be nicknames for genitalia. More on that in a bit. I took a look at Loadout back in its pretty early closed beta and a side quest back in 2012, so let's see how the game is shaping up in its launch. The look of Loadout is definitely one of its most notable features. In addition to that whole custom weaponry thing, the whole reason I went into that rant about Team Fortress 2 in the opening is simply because, well, this game does look quite a bit like it. You've got your distinctive, stylistically proportioned characters, and the rustic wasteland industrial themed battle arenas and over-the-top death animations, and of course ridiculous-looking weaponry. It's an easy comparison to make, a bit unfair, but still pretty much unavoidable. However, what Loadout does is amp up that violent but cartoony aspect of Team Fortress 2 by tenfold. Shooting enemies in certain areas will cause their limbs to be rendered into bloody, fleshless bones. It's possible to run around the game with a large cavernous hole in your chest, or even be rendered into a skullless brain with two eyes attached to your torso. Death animation ranges from simply falling over to being torn in half while crawling around and dragging your intestines behind you. I will admit, it's kind of amusing to be brought to a near-death state of damage and heal up only to watch your head grow back. But even with the over-the-top nature of it all, some people just might find it disturbing. And speaking of disturbing, this game certainly does not stop there, adding a bit of untantalizing nudity, played up more for comedic laughs. The new character Helga is a very large woman whose breast, stomach, and butt flop around with most of her movements, and she has her fair share of thongs and pasties for outfits. The guys can wear some rather unflattering short shorts, with Axel's version of the thong or his tighty whities showing off a massive bulge and one of his testicles is hanging out. Axel even has an outfit called Axel's Rod, which allows him to go bottomless and, despite the pixelization, makes a very apparent whole other use for jiggle physics. I guess that's one way to allow for equal opportunity. If you're ready to write this game off hearing both of these already, it's completely possible to play the game without having to encounter the uber violence or the perversion by heading into the options menu and unchecking the gore and nudity options. Not that the game won't subtly mock you for choosing to hide them, you should probably get used to that. Seriously. Loadout has a pretty solid soundtrack, but doesn't play its music with any sort of regularity. Logging into the game each time will probably give you a different track, and it seems that they switch it up at random. They're all really good rock-styled songs, however, with some evoking an industrial sound or techno sound, and making strong use of distortion effects. Unfortunately, it doesn't make its way into the game itself, as matches tend to remain quiet and allow only for the sound effects. As a shooter, it's exactly what you'd expect: gunshots, explosions, and the like. One sound of note which I find oddly jarring is when you hit an enemy, you'll hear a distinct high-pitched beeping sound to indicate that you've hit them. This goes for any weapon, and you get simple beeps for one-hit weapons like sniper rifles or rocket launchers, but a steady stream of repeated beeps if you have a sustainable beam-type weapon or an automatic rifle. It's nice to have the confirmation, sure, but I just find it a bit jarring, and I don't remember it being there from the early beta. Since the game makes use of taunt animations, many of which are found in the cash shop, each taunt comes with its distinct musical sting or sound notification, and since they count as sound effects, don't be surprised to hear them if you've turned the music off. They're mostly styled to sound like the kind of music that would play accompanying that taunt. Like the Michael Jackson-style dance playing a copyright-skirting tune to sound like Smooth Criminal, the LMFAO-inspired shufflin' taunt to play a dance party beat, and the Carlton dance, called 80s Dance, playing a brass horn riff that only sounds like that Tom Jones song you know that was actually written in the 60s. Definitely sounds worth listening to, but not entirely required for gameplay. Feel free to provide your own music for the matches. There's really not much to grasp to play Loadout, thankfully, but you will need Steam to play it, so be sure to search for that in the Steam store once you've downloaded it. Note, I might occasionally refer to this game as an FPS or first-person shooter, although in a purely technical sense it's a third-person shooter, since your character is always visible on screen. But I find this inconsequential, as I've always considered third-person shooters games to play more like Siphon Filter or Metal Gear Solid. You cannot adjust the camera distance or the angle in Loadout, nor does this outside viewpoint really help you in any way, as your character takes up a good chunk of the screen. The interface is still very reminiscent of an FPS. You cannot see immediately to the side or behind you, and you only fire in the direction that your reticle is pointing. Controls are also very FPS style. WASD to move and strafe, you can aim the reticle and steer with the mouse. Left click to fire, right click to aim down the sights. Use space to jump, hold shift to sprint, and double tap in any direction to do a dive roll. As such, the combat in the game is very and understandably chaotic, reminiscent of the old deathmatch FPS days, where dive rolling and bunny hopping while firing are more the norms than the exception. Pressing C will throw your grenade or deploy your secondary weapon like a turret once you have it upgraded. The mouse wheel or number keys will swap between the two weapons that you have equipped in your loadout. Pressing H, K, J, or L allows you to use one of your slotted taunts, which will only have the Cabbage Catch dance unlocked. The rest are cash op items. When taunting, you're unable to do anything until the animation finishes. It's been said that taunts do have a use in battle beyond the obvious, as using them when on a capture point can apparently speed up the capture process. Or, considering I can't really seem to verify that, maybe it doesn't, and doing the running man on a capture point is just making me feel better. Let's take a look at the most interesting aspect of this game, the custom weaponry system, which is actually one of the first things that the game points you towards. There are four main chassis of weapon: the rifle, the launcher, the pulse, and the beam. Rifles are your standard bullet-spraying weapons, launchers are your explosive projectile weapons, pulse weapons fire customizable orbs, and beams... well, do I need to finish that? Okay, well, I can say that unlike the previous weapons that use ammo clips, the beam has a heat percentage that, if it reaches 100%, forces a period of cooldown. Otherwise, just not firing the weapon will be enough to cool it off. Each chassis has a set of parts that you can use to modify its power and playstyle. Want more bullets per clip for your rifle? You can swap to a high-capacity magazine, sacrificing some of its power for 50 more rounds. Want to greatly boost the damage and accuracy of your gun? Use a sniper barrel, but know that you'll slow down the rate of fire in the process. Want the beam chassis to fire like a sniper rifle? Go ahead. There's also a few types of payload or ammo types that you can use. The main style slug for just solid and direct damage, the electric Tesla to cause steady electric damage to surrounding enemies, pyro that lowers the impact and direct burst damage but leaves a lasting fire effect, heal to, well, heal allies, and the juice which buffs allies with increased speed. There's talk of an honestly expected cryo payload somewhere down the line. Any player using a healing payload weapon will be marked on screen with a green medical cross to indicate that there are healers. When you start factoring the different types of chassis, shells, payloads, barrels, ammo capacity, and trigger systems, you'll quickly notice that there is a lot you can do to your weapon to make it work the way you want. Ever wish the TF2 medic used a rocket launcher that fired camera-guided healing rockets? Ever wish you had a shotgun that blasted your enemy with laser-guided fireballs? How about a sniper rifle that fires electric orbs? If you've had the option to do it, try it, and you can easily test out your weapon in a single-player test room, even with parts that you haven't purchased yet. You can even give your weapon its own custom name, which almost everyone does with penis references and racial slurs. We'll address that later. Just know that any weapon you make and bring to the fight will have a copy dropped upon your death that other players can use if they desire. That's why I make sure to strike fear into the hearts of my opponents by titling my weapons the Tickle Factory and the Sunshine Sprinkler. Granted, there are combos that do not work, regardless of the stats given, as a bolt-action ammo system might look impressive damage-wise, but isn't going to do much use with a full-auto trigger attached to it or a Gatling gun barrel, and some combinations can render your weapon borderline useless. Who knows, that might even be some form of strategy there, leaving rifles with misleadingly powerful-sounding names and ineffective parts on the battlefield when you know you're about to die. Unsurprisingly, not every weapon option is available to you from the start, meaning you'll have to play the game with your very basic weapon options for a short while before you even earn enough bloots, this game's in-game currency, to unlock them. Keep in mind that unlocking a weapon option on one chassis will only unlock it for that chassis, so if you've earned up to the pyro payload on your rifle and you want to use it on your beam weapon, you'll have to unlock the Tesla rounds first and then pyro again beforehand. Even though you can buy parts from the weapon crafting screen, a lot easier way to tell what item leads to what can be seen from the tech tree. This way, if your end goal is a sniper barrel, you won't have to buy the scatter barrels on accident. On the tech tree, make sure to scroll down quite a bit to see other options for your grenades, deployables, or shields that you can purchase as well. If you find yourself favoring a certain weapon part and using it in battle long enough, you'll earn experience to level up that part as well and increase its across-the-board damage. You won't gain that kind of XP very quickly at all, and it'll take you a good while and a lot of time with a weapon set before you level up any of those. Your weapons that you created are slotted to loadouts, which, beside a simple title drop, are a choice of 2 weapons, 1 grenade type or deployable, and 1 avatar setup. You can swap these during respawn if you wish, but you're limited to a few unless you unlock more with player levels or cash shop purchases. Having just mentioned avatar loadouts, I suppose I should explain that you have 3 avatar choices of characters, Axel, T-Bone, and Helga. Each one can be set up to a certain loadout with their own set of clothing options and taunts. Guess I should probably talk about the actual game you can play, right? The game is about as simple as an arena shooter can get. There's a few different stages of varying size, allowing for only 4 versus 4 player matches, which honestly does seem a bit low. There are 4 regular game modes and 1 major one that's recently been added back to the game. First up is Death Snatch, and no, that name is not a play on the euphemism for vagina. Well, probably not. Instead, this plays like a standard team deathmatch mode, except every time a player dies, they drop a vial of plutonium. In order to score a point for the kill, the enemy team must snatch up that vial by running over it to collect it. If a teammate picks up a vial dropped by another teammate's death, that kill is denied to the enemy team, and no points would be scored for that kill. Basically, if you see a blue vial on the ground while playing Death Snatch, pick it up. It doesn't matter where it came from, just do it. I say this because the players don't seem to understand how this works. Next up is Blitz, a point capture mode with a little bit of an interesting twist. Instead of points being captured and held like most FPS point capture modes, the minute a point is captured, illustrated by a slowly raising pair of polka dot boxer shorts, points are scored for the team and the next point is chosen randomly across the map. Again, I've been told that taunting on the points actually speeds this up, but I'm not entirely sure that's a thing that actually works. Extraction is an odd sort of game, similar to the kind of game where a team must hold onto a ball or an item of sorts to score points, except done in much shorter bursts. One player on each team is marked as the Extractor, and is tasked to collect the plutonium crystals scattered around the map and deliver them to certain areas. The rest of the team gets to decide if they want to hunt down the enemy Extractor or defend their Extractor. If the Extractor dies, the role is swapped to another player until that player dies, and the cycle continues until the game ends. An interesting aspect is that you can shoot the plutonium crystals on the map to make them explode, causing damage to the enemy Extractor if they're looking to loot it. This is a strategy I've not seen many people do. Finally, one of my favorite modes in the game, Jackhammer, which is capture the flag if the flag was the most powerful weapon in the game. This time the flag is the hammer stationed at each enemy base. Once grabbed, whoever's holding the hammer can swing it downward by left-clicking, delivering a one-hit kill to any enemy player that it smashes. Deliver the hammer back to your base, and if your hammer is still at the base, you'll score points for your team. The recently added Annihilation is only accessible by choosing the competitive section of the play area. It's not ranked, so don't fret about that description. Essentially, Annihilation combines every existing game mode, except for Extraction, into one very complex but still 8-person match. Kill an enemy and they'll drop plutonium vials to gain points. There's a few control points on the map that you can capture, and there's a hammer near each base that you can steal. In the base you can nab a buff that will increase one aspect of your character, a red buff to increase its damage, a blue buff to increase defense, and a green buff to increase the amount of healing that you put out, as well as the amount of healing that you would receive. The main purpose is to collect enough points for your side so that eventually the enemy base's shield will go down, and then take the enemy hammer back to your base to charge it, then take it into your enemy's base to destroy the core. As expected, this game mode takes a much longer time to complete, but the rewards are much higher. After the matches, you gain experience and bloots for upgrades, and if you level up, you'll gain a 2,000 bloot bonus. The winning team will be displayed on screen with the MVP of the match and the name of their weapon of choice front and center, allowing your team to spam some final taunts at the losing team. That twerking one seems absurdly popular. I will say the modes are somewhat limited as of now, and I can't help but feel that there's still a lot of content on the way. Hopefully we'll be getting a lot more content patches once the launch issues have been ironed out. It's an FPS, with an emphasis on immaturity, taunting, and dick jokes. Do I really need to go over this? Okay, fine. Yeah, this game is attracting the exact kind of people you'd expect it would, but oddly enough, I don't really care about it that much in this game. It's pretty much the entire purpose, and civility is right out the window when teabagging is a purchasable option, and your character tends to use its last fleeting moments of life to flip off the other team before they die. It's pretty reminiscent of an old browser-based game called Offensive Combat, which, before you request I review that, doesn't seem to exist anymore. Really, the more annoying and sadly expected aspect of the community comes from players on your own team. In a game where you can take your comically oversized weapons, stick it in between your legs, and start pelvic thrusting, there's still plenty of people who inexplicably take this very seriously. Expect to be called a noob more often from your teammates than the enemy, or coached endlessly about how bad you're doing from people who spend more time typing than actually helping out during the firefights. The online show Mud to MMO has a great video on this phenomenon called the Cliff Clavin effect, but the fact that this kind of behavior exists in this game is, well, I guess I never really understand people. Of course, if these same people don't get their way or don't feel the match, which can last 15 minutes at the most before the match ends, about half the time of an average MOBA match, is going fast enough or well enough, will just opt to quit in the middle of it, foregoing any rewards sacrificed to their apparent ADD. Rage quit is nothing new in multiplayer games, but unlike MOBAs, there doesn't seem to be any kind of match quitting penalty. The game does tend to cycle through new match members when current ones leave, but it's still annoying. To enter a match, click on the Play tab and choose Casual or Competitive. From there you can choose to play against bots or human opponents. Once chosen, 3 options to vote on will appear: 2 game modes and random match. I find it odd that you can't just set up your own room, or just outright decide which game type you want to play. There's an option on the play screen that reads Custom Match, but it is labeled as Coming Soon. The community seems to be really fond of Death Snatch, almost always voting for it when it comes up. Which is funny because it's the only one besides Extraction that they seem really terrible at. They'll kill the enemies, but almost always forget to pick up the plutonium vial. Death Snatch and Extraction are the only modes that I've played that I've lost to bots in. Players also tend to get vocal in the lobbies, yelling at players to ready up, which is done with a checkbox in the upper right, but there's no indicator of who's ready, so the blame just gets passed around a lot if the room is full but the match isn't starting right away. If you choose to play against other players, but not in Annihilation mode, you'll start the match in a Mexican standoff, surrounded by teammates and enemies, ready to open fire after the countdown. This is pretty much just for the fun of it, and doesn't really seem to count for the match's points. If you want to join up with your friends, you can always create a party before you join a match, but this doesn't always guarantee that you'll get in on the same team. While it does seem the game will try to place you on the same team, the auto-balancing caused by the rage quitters might force your friends into separate teams, and it won't end up going back to normal until the match is over. While the attitude of the players does fit the tone, and the issues I have with the players for once have little to do with the infinite smack-talking that goes on in these kind of games, it'd be nice to see the custom match modes implemented so you can choose who you play alongside. I'd also like to see a free-for-all deathmatch mode instead of a team-based one, some form of clan system, and at the very least allow for firefights larger than 8 players on a field. We'll just see how this goes. All Cash Shop currency is bought with the Edge of Reality currency Spacebuck, which do have a bit of a Microsoft Point Syndrome aspect of granting odd totals for the amounts that you can purchase them. $1 will net you $600, $5 will net you $3,200, $10 will grant you $7,000, and $20 will get you $16,000. As you might notice, you do get more for buying in bulk, but the prices of the items will make calculating the real cost slightly confusing. Most of the money can be spent on avatar costumes. A new hat, different jacket, disgustingly stained underwear, whatever you see fit. You can purchase more taunts here as well, but they can get rather expensive. You can also purchase different images to display on your name tag, although some of these are unlocked as achievements. A decent deal is the Starter Pack, which unlocks a few Cash Shop items and gives a limited 2x bonus to XP and Bloots, and grants a pretty hefty amount of space bucks as well for those interested in supporting the game and unlocking some of your favorite taunts and costume items. Apparently, there's some rather foolish talk of the game being pay to win by people who once again have no idea what that means. You cannot purchase weapon upgrades with space bucks, and while you can purchase some more slots to design and save weapons, or have additional loadouts saved, having more slots for weaponry and loadouts is a convenience at best. Anything that you will need to play the game can and must be earned. Don't let anyone waving that false flag and crying pay to win wolf fool you. Edge of Reality are good people. Hell, the closest you can get to that, if you're gonna play into that mindset, is the XP and Loot boosters, another common Cash Shop staple. But if you're not playing, you're not earning, so don't think that there's any way for you to just purchase your way to a full arsenal. Loadout is not gonna be for everyone. The game almost thrives on the obnoxious, immature aspect of the FPS audience, and the art style and general gore and sophomoric sense of humor will probably turn a lot of people off to it. But if you look past that, or simply don't care about it, the ability to try out your own custom creations in combat, as well as your enemies' creations, is a lot of fun. Here's my final rating. Those looking for a fast-paced arena shooter shouldn't have to look much further than Loadout. The game modes are fun twists on the FPS staples, and combat is based around dodging and leaping about while firing wildly at your opponent. Of course, being able to design your own gun should be the #1 draw to this game from fans of the genre, or those who just like to get creative. I also suggest those who see the future potential for larger maps, more game modes, and of course more weapon parts to get in on the ground floor while they can and help shape the game further. Taunts are probably the most fun of the cosmetic items, if not the priciest, but once you see everyone using the free cabbage catch, you might just want one so you'll be able to do something else. If you're looking for something a bit more useful to the game though, the XP and loot boosters will help you unlock those desired weapon parts just a bit faster. Of course, there's the starter pack if you're looking to get the most out of your game for a decent starter price and to show your support. This game is lowbrow humor at its finest, and not everyone is going to be into that, or the type of people that it's going to attract. As expected, the look of the game is a stomping ground for those who say "you mad bro" unironically, and until they implement a custom game match mode, they're all you're going to be dealing with. Having a lack of game modes, and of course lacking the ability to choose between them, might end up turning others off if they find that their favorite mode isn't available to play in the matches that they have time for. It's clear that despite the announcement of this being a launch, we're still looking at what seems to be a pretty early build, so you might want to wait a bit before diving in if the current amount of content doesn't really work for you. While I don't have anything planned for the upcoming episode, let's just say that now that a certain NDA has been lifted, there isn't going to be any kind of lack of content coming. Welcome to MMO Grinder's Side Quest, where I take a look at nearly decade-old games that people won't stop asking me to review, and have nothing to do with what I normally cover, in a futile attempt to get them to shut up. Today I'll be looking at Team Fortress 2, the cartoony class-based arena shooter released in 2007. This means the target audience of this game, who first played it at the age of 14 years old, are now old enough to legally drink in the United States. Team Fortress 2 is the second most revered game in Valve's Orange Box series, and the only one played with such intense regularity that it's become a meme farm, a gaming staple, and a fanbase ranging from faithful to obsessed to creepy. No one even remotely considered this game an MMO until it went free to play in 2011, and everyone who owns a PC and Steam already knows about it, has played it, or knows someone that does. If you haven't, then go play it. This has been an MMO Grinder Side Quest, and it's time you stop suggesting this game.